Anna Duhon Stokes is from a small community in southwest Louisiana called Shoe Peak. She is married to Caleb Stokes and is the president of Duhon Cattle, LLC, which is their family ranching operation. Her dad, Jay Duhon, her brother Matt, and her husband Caleb also help run the operation. She is also a part-time school bus driver for the local school board. She recently was appointed to the Louisiana Grazing Lands Coalition to represent the Louisiana Cattlemen's Association. Her dad, Jay Duhon, has been a committee member at large for a number of years. It is her dad who has put in place all the practices and initiatives that they currently use at their ranch. Let's welcome Anna Stokes.
Good morning. Unlike some of the other speakers, I have to have my cheat sheet. It's been a while since I've done some speaking. I'm sixth generation beef producer and caretaker of the land that supports our endeavors. The first generation of our family, his name was Cyprian Duhon, and along with another man, Mr. Jermaine Ellender, they brought the first cattle into the coastal marshes near a town called Hackberry. And that's my dad. Oh, it's going backwards. Okay. Here we go. So this was kind of what it looked like back then. It was actually a picture I found when I Googled Cyprian Duhon's name. This was, and not much has changed in our part of the country. A lot of people still do it the old way. They bring cattle to the marsh in the wintertime, take cattle out, and so this is where we're located in Calcasieu Parish. I believe it jumped ahead. Yeah, it did. I think I'm touching it with my paperwork. Hold on. Well, no. It's going too far. What's it? It's messing up. Go back, go back, go back, go back. Okay, right there. So the open range consisted of the Gulf Coast Prairie and the Gulf Coast Marsh. And the Gulf Coast Prairie is it's the southernmost extension of what was a tallgrass prairie of the central and midwestern states. And that actually reached all the way down into Louisiana. And I think, I keep going the wrong way. So it covered an area of 2.5 million acres in southwest Louisiana. And I can't see. So right in this area would be the northern part of it. It was a triangular shape. And because of the deep, rich soils, the majority of those prairies were converted to extensive agriculture use for the production of rice, sugarcane, and cotton. Today, extensive farming practices still exist on the eastern side of this triangle. On the western side is more cattle and hay production. And the parish of Calcasieu, where I live, we have the largest amount of cattle in the state of Louisiana. Gosh. Okay. So the coastal marsh ecosystem is low-flying, flat to concave areas with shallow depression, occasional low ridges and intermittent areas of open water throughout. Marsh soils are fertile and support a dense growth of vegetation, primarily grasses and grass-like plants, including sedges and rushes. The fluid marsh is too soft to support cattle, but the firm marsh can support them and is ideal cattle range. Our family now grazes on 1,000 acres in Calcasieu Parish that was once a part of the open range that our earlier generations grazed. We are approximately 18 miles from the Gulf of Mexico, and the Intercoastal waterway is our south fence line. That's the Intercoastal waterway right here. And the Intercoastal waterway runs from the Corpus Christi to Florida, and that's our southern fence line. And along and south of this canal, that's 18 miles to the Gulf of Mexico, is the marshes and coastal prairies that people graze today. And the next slide is going to show some cattle that are grazing alongside the Intercoastal, and you see there's no fences. That's our south border. We graze 1,000 acres. And that's a tugboat on the Intercoastal Canal. So our challenges of grazing cattle in the coastal prairie and tidal marshes of southwest Louisiana are variable at best, with elevations that range from sea level to as much as 10 feet. The geographical setting makes our area susceptible to flooding from Gulf storms, tidal action, and heavy rain. Once flooded, the coastal marsh may remain covered with water from a few days to several weeks. And saltwater intrusion due to a hurricane or in some cases man-made occurrences brought on by industrial development and the dredging of local waterways to support the movement of ships and barges is also a concern. For instance, during Hurricane Ike, this is the front gate to our pasture. The entire 1,000 acres were covered with 4 foot of salt water, and the cattle were still there. This was a second surge that came up behind the storm, and we didn't move cattle, but we didn't lose any. We swam them out and went down the road, and a local rancher up the road had a section that it was laying fallow, and that's where we moved the cattle to, and we did have to cull some and go through them and get rid of some, because it took about 6 months before we could get back, because it was right before it was time to plant winter forage, and once we planted winter forage, we were able to move some cattle back. And this is like our west boundary of our, that's the road actually coming in to the ranch. And this is during Hurricane Harvey, that was recently, the one that hit Houston. This was freshwater intrusion from opening the dam, which is some 93 miles north of us. And because we're along the Intercoastal, that water traveled down the river, down the Intercoastal, and it was like a big bubble, and it flooded 600 acres. And so this affected us last year because this was our stockpile pasture, and it stayed on there for 2 weeks. It was fresh water, but it killed a lot of the vegetation. So we kind of had a rough winter last winter. So our soil component on the ranch is mostly the Maury component. It's a seasonal zone of water saturation is at 24 inches during December, January, and February. So this year, it all came in September and October. We've yet to receive the traditional 24 inches that we're going to get. So we're pretty wet right now. And due to all these occurrences brought on by Mother Nature, we have to change with the tides, so to speak, to manage our ranch accordingly. So how do we do that? We no-till drill winter forage and cover crops when we can. We plant turnips, radish, oats, cereal rye and various clover varieties. Like I said, we do our best to try to no drill, but this year it was so wet, there was no way we could pull that drill. So we actually burn it down with chemical, set it on fire, burn all the rough forage, and then I taught my neighbor, has a big, what they call a buffalo. It's just a big pipe with some spikes on it, and they ran over the entire thing, and we flew ryegrass and cover crops on, and actually they're fertilizing it tomorrow. So it came up really good, and we're hoping we're going to be all right. So I mentioned stockpile. We also stockpile pasture, and this just shows some more of the cover crops and what we did and what we traditionally do. We plant turnips, radish, and so we do this pretty much in this area here. It's 200 acres in this area here. This is our stockpile. So this is not grazed at all from mid-June to October. The cattle are kept off of it. And then we have these pastures are broke down into smaller paddocks that we rotate cattle constantly. Also, our winter, when we plant our winter forage up here, these pastures are broke. I break this one into 3, this one into 3, this one into 2. As you can see, there's not a lot of trees on our place. There's a little here and a little here. That's another one of our big issues is shade. So I break and now move cattle as I see fit, or as a forage. We check it and we move cattle accordingly. So the first year we planted cover crops, we planted deep-rooted radish, and it's a radish and it looks like a carrot, but it's white. And we planted that in this, in this pasture right here. This whole entire pasture, we planted it. So the following summer, we were going through different minerals and mineral programs and trying to get our cattle to eat mineral and trying to keep them from eating too much mineral, and it's always a back and forth thing. But so I had a mineral salesman come along, and he said, well, let me test your grass. We'll test the protein content of your grass. So the stockpile pasture tested, which is this area, tested 8% protein. These pastures in here was 6% and less. Also these here. This pasture that we planted the cover crop, the deep-rooted radish in, tested 16% protein in the middle of the summer on that pasture. So now we plant cover crop everywhere we can because it has improved our soil quality so much that the grass is just, it takes care of the cattle. We also utilize prescribed burning. And this is a shot of the stockpile, kind of what it looks like before we start grazing it. But we do spring burning and we do winter burning or early winter burning. And that's to prepare both our winter pasture and our stockpile pastures when the undergrowth fuel is available. Now, we have made mistakes in the past. You have to make sure you have enough moisture in your soil. When you burn, if you have a lot of fuel to burn, because we burnt and we thought, oh man, we have a really great burn this year, and it was too hot, and all that came back was weeds. So we've learned through trial and error that our burning program, the conditions have to be just right. and everybody's different in different areas, and you just kind of got to play around with it. So when we burn the stockpile pastures, it's after they've utilized it, and it's to kind of knock down any invasive weeds that might be coming up in the spring. So we graze the stockpile pastures through October, November, December. This is kind of what they look like when we put them on in October. We also put out a protein liquid supplement with these cows to keep the bugs going and make them hustle after, because some of this forage is kind of rank because it's not been grazed. Cows that start calving, we calve early January through March, and early calving cows get to go on the winter forage as soon as it's ready. Dry or open cattle are maintained on the stockpile pastures in coastal marsh areas, along with the protein supplements throughout the entire winter. And that's just another shot of what the stockpile pastures look like when we put them on in October. This is a good shot. This is called Pascapalian. We call it joint grass where we're at. And it kind of looks like a Bermuda, a common Bermuda, but the joints are really long, and it doesn't make a seed head like Bermuda does. And this tests 8 or 9% protein every year, and so we supplement with the liquid supplement, and we call this ice cream. And once they get a little taste of the ice cream, you cannot keep them off. I mean, we fight if you try to rotate them out of it. So right now they're on the ice cream at home, and we just don't worry about them until it's time to start moving pairs to the winter forage. So I use electric fence extensively. I'm a self-taught electric fence person, and I usually move it all by myself. I can do a quarter of a mile in 30 minutes by myself because I got a little setup. The ranch, like I said before, is divided into 13 main pastures, and we use the electric fence year-round. And we also use our shade. We have to move when we move cattle around, we do it so that they can have shade because we're limited in shade. So we hold our cost per cow to about $325 a year per head. And we strictly rely on stockpile pasture in the winter forage we plant to maintain our cows throughout the winter months. We avoid the use of hay due to our stockpile pasture practices. We do not own any hay equipment and never have owned any hay equipment. We have bought hay once in the last 7 years, and that's because it snowed last year on December the 8th, and it was super cold, and even the crawfish covered up because it was so cold. So due to the low-cost operation utilizing the strategies we've mentioned, we can add cattle to our operation to increase production. We also lease cattle on different occasions. And we learned the ins and outs of that from Mr. Harlan Hughes, and we've been able to lease cows for a percentage of a cow owner's calf crop. And we only take bred cows in the first year, and we usually do it for a minimum of 3 years. And the sharing of the calf crop runs from 65 to 70% for the rancher leasing the cows. And this practice has allowed us to help out fellow ranchers who may be in a drought situation, and so instead of liquidating, they are able to maintain their herds. We help out young people wanting to get in the cattle business by allowing them to graze with us also, and it lowers the cost per cow. And they help with the labor. My dad's 77, and it's just me and him. My brother works a full-time job. My husband works a full-time job. So when we take in these younger guys, it helps. And this is just some pictures of some of our pears and in the summertime and what they look like. We also put in the first solar well in the state of Louisiana with help funding through NRCS after Hurricane Rita and Ike, because we had no fresh water to drink. They had no electricity, so we had to come up with something. So that 6,000 gallon tank, it holds 6,000 gallons. It's a 40-foot submersible, a pump down in a 40-foot hole, and it pumps the water into there, and then it gravity feeds to these troughs. And this summer we added a third trough to that system. We also planted summer hemp this year for the first time for our bulls. So when we take them off the cows, it worked great, except we didn't prep the seed, the seed bed preparation. The summer hemp has as much protein as alfalfa. They got on it and wiped it out in about a week. So our stand wasn't that great. And recently we planted 40 acres of tall prairie grass, including gamma, little blue stem, Indian grass, switchgrass, and native forbs. And this was also an EQIP program supported by NRCS. And they've established pretty well. This is some switchgrass. And we're hoping to be able to start prescribed grazing this end of next summer. But we're not supposed to like really graze it for 3 years to let it get established. So we're trying to return the prairie back to what it used to be. We have approximately 200 cows that consist of Brangus and Brafer type cows, and we use 44 farm registered Angus bulls, and we calve from January 1st through March 30th of each year. We market our calves private tree through a local beef alliance that we've kind of developed, and all the members of the alliance maintain similar genetics in their base herd and use registered Angus bulls. Our local veterinarian serves as our health protocol monitor, and calves are enrolled in an aging source program. They're vaccinated, knife castrated, wormed, and we weigh them in the spring so that we can estimate their marketing weights for the fall, and we group them by sex and sort them accordingly to those weights. They're also classified as natural, and I'm the marketing director for this alliance, and I forward contract sell the cattle usually in the month of July, and we currently qualify for 44 Farms buyback program this year, which is new. It's called Prime Pursuits, and they will be supplying Walmart they'll have a little section in the case of Walmart stores. They're going to be in 400 stores, so we're hoping to be able to market our calves this year straight to 44 farms in their buyback program. So all these practices that we do on the ranch on a daily basis and things that we've learned, and I can tell you when my dad started coming home with all these ideas, I was like, oh my God. And you just adding more work to me, but it has proven to work, and everything changes from year to year. We got to be prepared for the different weather, what Mother Nature's going to throw at us. If we're going to have too wet of a fall, too wet of a winter, that all affects the quality of this stockpile forage and what we try to do. And so it's a season-to-season type deal.